My name is Stephen Olikar. I'm the founder and president of the Millennial Action Project. We're a nonpartisan organization working with the next generation of elected officials to bridge the partisan divide and strengthen our democracy. So it's a real pleasure to be here to moderate this debate. So shall we get started, guys? Sure. All right. So we have two rules. The first rule is that we will not be shouting over each other so the audience can hear what you're saying. The second rule is that I'm going to pose a question to one of you, and you'll have an opportunity to rebut the last statement, and then I'll give you each one more response. You'll have a maximum of 2 responses. That'll help us move on to the next topic. So this debate is going to focus broadly on 3 topics: the economy, culture, and international issues. And we'll see where that takes us. Are you guys ready? Have you guys ever debated each other before?
Well, we were on a panel together last year, and the point of the panel was, how are you going to get along? So we actually were able to agree that Saudi Arabia is bad, and locking up people for nonviolent offenses is also a bad thing. So there were some points of agreement. Oh, that's right, and the death penalty too. So there were points of agreement, but we'll see, tonight if we agree as much. Doubt it. We're going to get into some specifics. So
I think we're agreeing on too much right now. Let's get into the debate. All right, let's start with the economy. So since Trump has been in office, unemployment has continued to go down. Job creation has stayed at a pretty high clip. On the other hand, there's an issue with wages, and just recently, the federal government came out with its deficit numbers for the last fiscal year, and it showed there's about a $1 trillion deficit, which is the highest since 2012. So I will start with Charlie. Do you think the Trump economy is doing well for the middle class, given those numbers, doing well for the next generation that might inherit that deficit? And do you think the tax cuts are just a short-term boost is it like a sugar rush, or is it going to lead to long-term prosperity?
Right. I mean, look, we have the best economy in American history thanks to President Donald Trump. And look, we're seeing the lowest ever black unemployment rate, lowest Latino unemployment rate, lowest Asian American unemployment rate, lowest black poverty rate. We're seeing wages actually going up. So under President Obama, for the last 3 years of his presidency, the European economy and the American economy were basically the same, almost to the 5 decimal points. You couldn't distinguish between the two. The day President Trump got inaugurated, all of a sudden you saw explosive economic growth. So under the last 18 months of President Barack Obama, we had about 1.5% GDP growth. President Trump doubled that after his first year in office, and we got even more than that. We went as high as 4.2% in 1 quarter last year. As far as average earnings, so under President Obama, the last 23 months of his presidency, average wages went up about $1.30 an hour, more or less. Under President Donald Trump, over 2.5 years in his presidency, wages have gone up to $2.30 an hour, almost $1 increase, about 40% on average. Every single metric you could possibly look to in the economy is going in a positive direction. And it's because of renewal of the American spirit, deregulation of our economy, and the other thing that we don't talk about enough, and something that, Kyle, I think you'll appreciate because we both don't like foreign occupation and foreign war, President Trump has finally made this country energy independent, that we don't have to buy our oil as much from the Middle East thanks to what? Fracking, natural gas, and innovative technology that a lot of people on the left want to outlaw and completely get rid of. We are now, for the first time in American history, exporting more oil than we are importing. So we don't have to buy oil from maniacs in the Middle East that hates our guts and entire civilizations and theocracies that want to destroy America. And that's a very positive thing that doesn't get talked about a lot. And look, the broader picture is that the economy is so good that even President Barack Obama is trying to take credit for it, right? I mean, we are seeing an economic renaissance, the likes of which is historic and unprecedented. We were through an economic malaise under President Barack Obama, and now we are seeing prosperity that is totally amazing. And whoever's to credit for it, Kyle, we can debate that back and forth, but the results are not to be debated. I have a packet of the most amazing economic success you could possibly imagine. It's a good thing that we have the lowest black unemployment, Latino unemployment, Asian unemployment, disabled unemployment, lowest ever black poverty rate. My favorite statistic, I'll close with this, 6 million people are no longer on food stamps, and now in the labor market, that's 6 million people that don't have to go get food stamps anymore, thanks to President Donald J. Trump.
All right, Kyle, your response.
Okay, so there's a lot there. I'll try to make my response relatively short here. I don't think the way that we measure the economy, the metrics that are typically used by mainstream media, I don't think they're good metrics. I think they're absolutely terrible metrics. I think that when you look at something like the unemployment rate, okay, I'll give him partial credit for that unemployment rate going down, but then you also have to give Obama partial credit for that as well, because he did dig us out of the hole of that Great Recession. But basically, listen, the point is, Donald Trump used to bring up this thing called the U6 unemployment rate. Now, the U6 unemployment rate is a more accurate reflection of what the real unemployment rate in the country is. I mean, I'm sure you guys remember back to the primary season, he'd be like, you know, the actual unemployment rate is really more something like 10%, 15%. He would always kick that number up because Donald Trump was kind of right. The way we calculate it is nonsense. So when you look at the real unemployment rate, I actually should say the official one is 3.5%. The U6 unemployment rate is 6.9%, so it's significantly higher than what's often touted by mainstream media. And you have to include the discouraged workers, you have to include the people who work on and off, and people who are part-timers who want to be full-timers. So there's this whole category called the underemployed, and that's another 22 million people. You have 8.6 million people officially categorized as working poor in this country. You have, this fact always gets me, I think it's incredible that 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 78%. That's nothing to write home about. And thank you, yes. And listen, half of workers make $30,000 a year or less, and 40% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency. So actually, what I would have agreed with you on if you presented it this way is, man, Obama kind of sucked, but so does Trump.
So let's look at these numbers. Number one, the U6 unemployment is lower under Trump than it was under Obama. So even if I were to take your argument, the U6 unemployment is lower. Number two, we have more job openings than we have actually people to fill it. And because of that, we are seeing wages go up. And I could prove it. So this is one of the most amazing statistics. Average income for under Bush, Obama, and Trump. So under 8 years of George W. Bush, average middle-class income, because you focus on middle-class earners, people that need money for an emergency, the backbone of our country, middle-class income went only $500 up under 8 years of President George W. Bush. It went up $1,000 over 8 years under Barack Obama, $5,000 in 2.5 years under President Donald Trump. $5,000. This is middle class. These are middle class folks. So, sure. Kyle, you're going to find agreement that people are indeed still trying to get ahead in America. I'm not going to say we're living through perfection, but boy, has President Donald Trump created the best economy in American history, especially for middle class earners. And I'll say, you mentioned the working poor. So how does one help the working poor? Is it by taking money from job creators and entrepreneurs and risk takers? You might say yes. I would say no. I'd say the best way to help people that honestly need the help in our society, and President Donald Trump has demonstrated this, is through a robust and booming economy. And that's why one of the most amazing statistics is the poverty rate. And I mentioned that. The black poverty rate is the lowest it has ever been. Poverty is a holistic measurement of income, of debt, of likelihood to graduate high school. The entire picture, it's the lowest it's ever been in recorded history in the black community. And that's something really to be said, Kyle.
I don't play identity politics, so don't bring up black or Asian. Just tell me what the actual rate is.
Well, look, these are numbers from the federal government. That's perfectly fair. So how about this? How about urban unemployment is the lowest it's ever been? It is. So
that's the same way of, that's just saying the same thing in a different way.
You want to, I mean, you say don't want to play identity politics? Perfectly fine. These are numbers that are, by the way, published by the Congressional Budget Office. These are numbers, and by the way, Kyle, I look forward to you now supporting the complete and total deletion of the Congressional Black Caucus now that you're on record saying that you don't like identity politics. So
listen, if free people want to associate,
you live by the sword, you die by the sword.
No, let me just say, because you brought that up. If free people want to associate and form whatever groups they want, that's perfectly fine.
Well, if free people want to reference statistics, they should be able to use whatever statistics they want.
Listen,
all right, Charlie.
Let me just say, the only thing I'll say in response to what you said is you like to bring up the average number. Jeff Bezos and I have an average net worth of $50 billion.
Charlie, I'll let you finish what you were saying, and then we'll go to Kyle.
So you mentioned the tax cut, which I'm really happy to talk about. 22 million Americans, 22 million families, I'm sorry. So over 80 million Americans have an extra $1,000 in their pocket this year, thanks to the largest middle-class tax cut in American history. This is one of the most misrepresented pieces of legislation in our country's history. I have to listen to the Democrats time and time again say this just was a handout for corporations and a handout for the richest of these. That is incorrect. This is the largest, most successful middle-class tax cut in American history. Fact, a family of 4 with an annual income of $73,000, which is the median family income in America, saw a tax cut of more than $2,000, a 58% reduction in taxes, thanks to President Donald J. Trump. And so you care about middle-class workers. I care about middle-class workers. President Donald Trump has actually delivered results and success for the people that we care about, the middle part of this country that trusted them with their vote for the first time in a long time. I'm so proud that this president is able to say, I've made life better for people that both parties have turned their back on for so long.
Okay, so
Kyle.
here we go. Now, so if you want the truth about that tax cut bill, let's talk about it. First of all, will I give credit in certain areas? Absolutely, because I'm not a hack. So when it comes to, I'm not saying you are, by the way, I'm just saying that I'm not one.
Thank you, Kyle.
So the good parts of that bill, the child tax credit went from $1,000 to $2,000. That's something we can agree on.
Good.
That's a good thing. The standard deduction was increased. That's a good thing as well. By the way, I like how we're both super tall and these mics are so low. It's so awkward to have to
It's got to be like that presidential, like, to keep leaning over, but whatever.
All right, so now let's get into it. That's the good part. That's the stuff I agree with. Here's the bad part, okay? In 1952, the corporate tax rate, it accounted for 33% of all federal tax revenue. Okay, you understand that? So the corporate tax accounted for 33% of all federal tax revenue. Today, corporate taxes only bring in about 8% of that federal revenue. So that means a giant tax cut for corporations. Trump looked at that and said, we should give them a bigger cut. So the rate went from 35% to 21%. That cost more than $1.3 trillion. Also, this bill scrapped a little thing called the alternative minimum tax. So what that means is that if there's a rich person who's got a team of lobbyists and a team of accountants trying to help them dodge taxes, okay? Let's say they get that rate down to 14%, their effective rate. The alternative minimum tax says, no, you have to pay a minimum of 25%. You can't deduct below that 25% number. This bill got rid of that because it wants the ultra-rich to take all the money and run out the back door. If this bill was not for helping the rich, then why is it that they took the estate tax, which only applies to people with goddamn estates, and they said, hey, $5.5 million is the line, how about we make that $11 million? So in other words, a tax that only impacted the rich, he said, well, you know, let's cut that one quite a bit as well. And furthermore, and the most important point about this bill is that people making $75,000 a year or less will actually see a tax increase over a decade. So what happened was all of the tax cuts for regular people, all the tax cuts for you, they're temporary, but the tax cuts for corporations and the rich, they're permanent.
So
there's a lot there. Can I respond?
I'll let you respond in the context because we're going to stay on the economy because you've both addressed a lot of the key points. But one point
you don't even need to be here. We could just keep going.
Yeah. But one point we did not address is the deficits and the debt. So if you can just address that in your response as well.
I mean, you're going to find no disagreement that the debt and deficit is one of the most urgent issues of our time. And look, President Trump has submitted budget after budget to Congress that would balance over 5 to 10 years. And look, Kyle and I will agree on this. One of the ways that we can balance our budget is ending these silly and reckless and morally objectionable foreign occupations of countries that we shouldn't be in. We can agree on this. And by the way, 2 things of this, done with an elite force of foreign fighters, thanks to President Trump's asymmetrical foreign policy. The leader of ISIS is dead in the last 24 hours. That's a thing that we should applaud. And by the way, that was done with an elite fighting force, no need for a foreign occupation. We can both applaud, the death of an ISIS leader that was totally and completely evil. And so, look, the debt and deficit, I'll tell you, we need dramatic spending cuts, and we need to, shrink the size and scope of government. We could talk about that at length. I think we're here to more talk about things that are happening in real time with President Donald Trump. I want to make 3 points about what Kyle said about the tax bill. Number 1, Republicans in Congress tried to make the tax cuts permanent, and the Democrats objected to it. They filibustered it, and they never allowed it to happen. That's number 1. So I agree that the tax cuts were not permanent for the middle-income workers, but it was the Democrats that prevented it from actually becoming permanent in the last 18 months. Number 2, you talk about corporate tax rates and the percentage of the budget. Well, for those of us that understand and have studied the Laffer curve, we're actually seeing revenues go up. We have record numbers of revenues in the federal government go up because...
Then why is the deficit growing?
Well, it's going because we're also increasing spending on ridiculous foreign occupation wars, something that I'm against. Okay, so we'll agree on that. We're increasing spending, but we're also cutting taxes, so I'm a big believer that we should cut taxes and cut government. So if you're going to... My philosophy is quite consistent. I think that it's better in the people's money when they earn it, it's not government's money to take it. But the second thing I want to make is this, is that the corporate tax rate
as it was lowered, so it was lowered from 38% to about 22%, we're actually seeing compliance go up. So you cited the 1950s. So the 1950s tax rate was marginally ineffective, two different things, but it was over 90%, right? And
No, I'm talking about the corporate tax. I wasn't talking about the marginal tax rate.
Oh, you're not individual. Okay, I stand corrected. Then the individual, the corporate tax was about 40%, 50% in the 1950s. But
Right, it accounted for 33% of all federal tax revenue.
Right, so now we don't have the numbers yet in, but it was 8% last year. It's projected to exceed over 13 to 15% because now corporations are complying with the actual federal tax rates, because that's what happens when you lower the tax rates. Less people put their money overseas, and more people comply with the actual laws on the books. The third thing,
hold on,
I want to
just
get
real
to some
quick.
philosophy really
I'll
quick.
let you respond just real quick. The effective rate went from 23% to 12%, so that's not true. The effective rate went down
You
under
mean
Donald Trump.
corporation or individual?
Corporate.
12% for corporate tax rate?
Yes, the effective corporate tax rate went from 23%
Good. No, I mean,
to
it
12%.
should be 0%, but yeah, that's perfectly fine.
That's a very unpopular position. Please proceed.
Yeah, no, and I'm happy to elaborate on it. And this is a bigger philosophical point, and this is where Kyle and I will find no agreement whatsoever, respectfully. Is it our money or is it government's money? And that's a really important discussion to have, because you frame this as the creation of wealth is somewhat of a bad thing. I'm not going to try to mislabel what you're saying, but just because someone got rich does not mean anyone got poor. And in order to get rich in a market society means that you have to employ people, you have to have a good idea, you have to voluntarily sell it over a long period of time, people have to purchase that product, you have to continue to prove yourself, you have to probably buy property or rent property, you have to get money flowing through the economy. Just because someone got rich does not mean they went around and stole the money away from people. Wealth creation in a market society requires innovation, entrepreneurship, something that makes every single person in this room richer. So when someone gets rich in a market society, they did not pillage and plunder and get that money with putting guns to people's heads. Instead, they were creative, they were entrepreneurs, and they were innovative, something that should be rewarded. And so that's where the philosophical difference is. You look at wealth creation as something that might be bad. I don't want to mislabel it, but
That's not what I think.
your preferred presidential candidate says billionaires should not exist. I believe that every single person in this room that is using an iPhone, that goes to Amazon.com and uses Google and Facebook, your life has been made better thanks to the profit incentive that only someone that could become a billionaire is made possible. A market economy is the greatest, most assured way to create wealth for all people. Socialism is much more about hating the rich than helping the poor. I yield my time to Kyle.
Right. Okay, well, allow me to steal from your favorite, well, he's president now, but wrong. That's what I have to say to that. So, I just want to test your theory real quick on wealth creation here. So, I'm going to give you two facts. I just want a yes or no answer. Jeff Bezos has over $150 billion. There are 50,000 homeless veterans in this country. If you could take 1% of his money to end homelessness for veterans, would you do it?
I hope he gives it voluntarily. I will not put a gun to his head.
That's a no.
And I'll tell you why. First of all, that's a false choice. That's a false choice. Let me tell you why.
It's a thought experiment,
Because
bro.
we have spent hundreds of billions of dollars to try to solve homelessness by taking money from the rich over the last 40 years. You want to solve homelessness? Stop electing Democrats. The city likes Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, and Portland.
Donald Trump is president, and we have 500,000 homeless people. That makes no sense.
I don't actually love Amazon or Jeff Bezos, but you're starting to make me like him even more throughout the course of the debate. Wow. Jeff Bezos did not make his money going around city to city with automatic machine guns stealing people's money away. Half this room probably uses Amazon on a weekly basis. You have to be innovative. You have to be an entrepreneur. He employs hundreds of thousands of people in an extraordinarily competitive market. He did not get it by being a robber baron. That's how you get rich in countries that are socialist countries.
Wrong.
To get rich in a capitalist society, you must have a good idea. People must believe in that idea and continue to purchase that idea over a long period of time.
There's this thing called a social contract.
Oh, this is
a
good.
very
Let's
simple thing.
When did I sign that, Kyle? I must have missed it.
Okay, well, you can go live in Somalia where they have none. Good luck.
All right, so you believe in the Rousseauian theory that all of us are nothing more than a collective. I disagree.
I didn't say that. I said there's a social contract.
Who do you think wrote the social contract theory?
Well, I thought you liked the Constitution. I thought you liked our founding fathers.
Right, the Constitution that talks about, this is so important. The Constitution actually rejected social contract theory. It said our rights come from what? From God, not from government. That government should not infringe upon your rights. The Constitution rejected coercive government action. The United States Constitution rejected the idea that actually the entire United States Constitution was a warning sign against having government come too much infringing of our rights. This is the actual philosophical debate of our time. Because Kyle, you look at the entire political kind of system and you say, okay, there should be more government action because we must look ourselves first and foremost as a collective. Therefore, Jeff Bezos, the only way he was able to get that amount of money was eventually try to exploit people over a longer period of time. I look at that and I say, wow, that is a beautiful thing that someone is able to create that much wealth for that many people. And guess what?
And not pay his people a living wage until we forced him to.
Hold on a second.
All right. We'll let Charlie finish, and then you'll have a response, and then we'll move on.
I believe in private collective bargaining. I also believe in a booming economy. We have more job openings than people to fill it. If people at Amazon are quite happy, when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that Amazon's the worst thing in the world, she was responded to by Amazon worker after Amazon worker and said, our wages are going up. We have wonderful living conditions.
With Jeff Bezos standing right behind them.
Well, again, I want to make myself perfectly clear. I'm actually highly critical of Amazon, and I'm really glad they didn't get the $10 billion taxpayer-funded contract for their company. However, I will take a definitive stand against the demonization of wealth creation in our country. Because
nobody's doing that. You're talking to yourself.
Well, your preferred candidate says billionaires should not exist.
Yeah, but you know what that means, Charlie? Somebody could have $999 million, and they're still really rich, and they're going to be okay.
So let's talk about this.
And we could give people health care, and we could give people college.
So let's talk about it. The rule should not be how do we not have billionaires. The rule should be how did we create $22 trillion of wealth in this country? Is it because we have the most people? No. Most natural resources? No. It's because of a market economy that embraces risk-taking, entrepreneurship, and the individual. Countries across the world have tried everything from exploitation and stealing money away. India has more people. China has more people. The only reason China is able to get any sort of form of economic growth, they tried state-run coercion, is they actually embraced more market principles over the last 15, 20 years, despite the evil communist Chinese party. Kyle, here's the question I have for you, is do you believe when people create a certain amount of wealth from Facebook or Google or Apple or Home Depot or Amazon, the companies that everyone in this room use, Coca-Cola on down, do you believe that's inherently exploitation, or do you believe they had to get that through voluntary transaction and enriching people all the way along the way?
I don't believe it's inherently exploitation, but I also believe we need rules and we need referees. And I also think
I totally agree with
I
that.
see shades of gray where you see black and white. And your whole thing is like, oh, the free market is so great, it's so wonderful.
Important point.
No, hold on here. Because I'm actually the real moderate on this, because I think sometimes the answer is the free market, and sometimes, yes, the answer is government. Government is not inherently evil either. Government has done a lot of good things. I mean,
so look,
that shouldn't be controversial. If you believe in having a military, you believe in the government. If you believe in having paved roads, you believe in the government.
And all that. But right now, as things stand, we have a fourth branch of government, and you'll agree with this. We have a fourth branch of government. We are the most regulated economy in the Western Hemisphere outside of some of the Western European countries. Federal Trade Commission, the Employment Prevention Agency, which is also called the Environmental Protection Agency. We have agency after agency, hundreds of agencies with unelected, unknown, and unchecked bureaucrats. And guess what? They favor the power of the well-connected, the few, and the rich that are able to afford the lobbyists. And you look at so Kyle, here's another question that I'm just always perplexed by.
He wants to ask us a question, so let's let him jump.
No, I mean, it's fine. Okay, but let me close the point. So you say, Charlie, I look at things as the way they are. We right now spend over $1 trillion of our own money to regulate the economy. That is far too much money. The best regulation is competition. The best regulation is encouraging more entrepreneurship. The best regulation is empowering individuals to be able to compete against the big power brokers that you think that need to be disrupted.
Okay, so let's move on to culture. One of the big parts of Trump's campaign was talking about political correctness. So Kyle, I want to get your thoughts on this. After a few years, how are we doing on that issue? Where do you draw the line? And generally, how do you think our political climate has improved or gotten worse since that time?
I mean, honestly, this kind of bores me, this topic, because it's like, okay, whatever, political correctness. I think I'm relatively politically incorrect. I say things that piss people off all the time. I mean, it is what it is. But my problem with the right is that oftentimes they take this term of political correctness, and what they really want to do is use that as an excuse to say things that are factually incorrect. So when Donald Trump goes out there and he says, for example, like he did on the campaign trail, that we need a total and complete shutdown of Muslims coming into this country, that's not politically incorrect. That's just incorrect. You're just a dick, because there's like 1 billion people who are Muslims, and they're not all guilty for the sins of Al-Qaeda. So, yeah, that's my take on it. I think I'm politically incorrect myself, but I think that oftentimes people on the right use it to get away with saying things that are just factually incorrect.
Charlie.
So I guess the question is, are we more or less politically? I mean, look, it depends on where you live in the country. I mean, in California, it's perfectly fine to border jump or line cut to come into our country, but if you misgender someone, you could face prison time in California. So
that's totally not true.
It is. The law is on the books. There is a law on the books that if you're an employee of the state government of California,
which overrides any state law.
If you misgender someone as an employee of the state of California intentionally, you could potentially go to prison for workplace harassment.
That is speech police. This is hyperbolic nonsense. We have the First Amendment, and that's the supreme law of the land.
Opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. I visit college campuses all the time. A lot of what you say is perfect.
You're so oppressed, bro. Go wear a diaper again.
I visit college campuses all the time, and I'll tell you, Kyle, if you saw, and I think if you're intellectually honest, you'll agree with this, that the speech police that happens all across the country, where it's telling people that they can't say certain things, where they're cracking down on saying America's the greatest country in the history of the world, I have to say that these are the types of things that should be really concerning. And there is a death of free speech in this country, and people like Bill Maher really respect that and understand that.
I agree with that too.
And that stems from political correctness, right? That comes from the speech police, but you're really only seeing it on one side.
No, that's not true at all. I believe in free speech, which is why I think Colin Kaepernick should be in the NFL right now.
Well, Colin Kaepernick was never fired from the NFL because he decided to kneel during the national anthem. He's not in the NFL because he's a horrible quarterback.
Yeah, look at all these NFL experts over here. I'm sure they know what they're talking about.
If Colin Kaepernick was any sort of decent quarterback and not throw 14 interceptions and only 8 touchdowns in his last season with the San Francisco 49ers, of which they are now undefeated thanks to Jimmy Garoppolo doing a lot better than they were under Colin Kaepernick. Kyle, this is very interesting. Do I believe that Colin Kaepernick had a right to be a fool and kneel during the national anthem? Absolutely. Being civilly disobedient is a right. But you know what? I also have a right to call him unpatriotic and disrespectful for kneeling during the national anthem while it is paid as a try to tribute to our veterans.
Excuse me. Why is it that when left-wing people protest and when they dissent, all of a sudden it's unpatriotic and you hate America? Why can't it just be, no, these are my ideas and I think these would fix the country even if you don't agree? See, I'm willing to grant you that whatever you say, you actually are saying it because you want to fix the country. But why is it that you don't give lefties that respect? All of a sudden when there's somebody on the left, you think, oh no, it's because you hate America. That's why you're saying X, Y, and Z.
Well, I'll tell you exactly why. So the tradition of the national anthem that was incorporated post-World War II in the National Football League and was instituted was to try to remember veteran sacrifice during World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam War.
During the Red Scare.
Thank you for your service, thank you for your service. And the reason that Colin Kaepernick was being selfish is during a moment when you're supposed to be somber and reverent, when you're supposed to reflect on the blood and the sacrifice that veterans put, he decided to make the cameras point at him. Not point at the veterans, not point at the flag. It was selfish for him to do that, to try to misrepresent a highly complex issue that is criminal justice reform at a very bizarre time to do it during the singular time in a sports ceremony when we take a moment to remove our hats and put our hands over our heart to remember the veterans that gave everything so that we can live in the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world.
Charlie, whenever there's something that happens, like in Ferguson, Missouri, there's a police brutality case, and then people riot. What do people like Charlie say?
Destroy buildings? Yeah, I'm going to speak against that.
Yeah, but what do you say when that happens? They go, you know what? My only issue with these people is if only they would protest police brutality through peaceful methods, I would be okay with it. And then Colin Kaepernick does exactly that, and you flip on him.
No, again, I said he has a right to do that. I also have a right to critique his decision. And so
and you have a right to be wrong.
Of Baltimore during the movement, the mayor of Baltimore, while all this was happening, remember she said, we need to give our people space to riot. I mean, there's nothing admirable about destroying property in your own community when you're trying to protest injustice or brutality. I'm not sure what kind of argument you're trying to make.
The point, right over your head. I agree with you. Rioting is bad. That's why I think what Colin Kaepernick did is good, because he's protesting through peaceful means.
Of course. Sure. So, and I'm saying he was being a selfish individual that was all about himself during a ceremony that was all speech about veterans. So we're talking in circles here, broader about political correctness. I'm not the one that's going to say Colin Kaepernick should not have a right to do that. In fact, I defended his right to be incorrect and his right to be selfish and his right to be wrong. That's what makes this American experiment so special. I will say this, and the rise of political correctness and the rise of division in this country, you only see political violence predominantly on one side, and that is Antifa.
Oh,
you do not see Trump supporters wearing Make America Great Again hats, waiting outside of Bernie Sanders rallies, punching them in the face. You do not see people wearing MAGA hats, assaulting gay journalists in the streets of Portland where no people are arrested. You do not see people wearing
nationalist
MAGA hats,
terrorism,
punching left-wing people in the face. Something of which, very important point, Kyle. Guess what? I denounce it, the president denounces it, yet half the people running for the Democrat Party have not denounced Antifa. Why do people running for the Democrat nomination not denounce Antifa?
Oh, yeah, bro.
A
Bernie Sanders is
paramilitary
pro-Antifa.
organization that goes around and pounds people on the head if they dare disagree with them. Could you imagine for a second if people were wearing MAGA hats and going and beating journalists in the streets?
I can, because they did it as rallies.
Rightfully arrested. So we want to talk about culture. Show me where conservative Antifa is. Show me a well-funded, well-organized an organization that was not denounced by the president or people like it that go after political opponents. You can't find it, and there's a reason why the Democrats will not denounce Antifa. It's because if you want to see the face of the Democrat Party, I'll show it to you. They're wearing a mask.
Okay,
all right, Kyle gets the last word on this.
Listen, Charlie, you're not debating the Democrats. You're debating Kyle Kulinski. If you just asked me, it would have been very simple.
What do you think of Antifa?
Do I denounce Antifa? Yes. I denounce political violence. But I think it's really interesting that you started this whole rant by acting like political violence is only on the left. That's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life.
I said predominantly. So show me a singular instance where there are people wearing MAGA hats waiting outside of a leading Democrat.
I'll do you one better. How about a guy named Caesar Sayoc who murdered people with a fucking MAGA hat on?
And he sent bombs to Republicans. He sent bombs to Democrats. That guy was mentally unhinged, and I'm not going to defend him, and I'll denounce him.
Good.
Or how about the shooter in Dayton, Ohio, that said Elizabeth Warren was his hero, and then he went and shot 10 people? What about that, Kyle?
Oh, Elizabeth
we can go
Warren,
back and forth all day long with
real dangerous.
Or how about the guy that
Warren.
shot up the congressional baseball field that loved Bernie Sanders? We can go back all day long.
All right, we're going to move on. We're going to move on from this. All right, let's move to another space here on the international front.
Great.
One of the big issues today is the issue of foreign corruption and influence in our elections. So I'll start with you, Charlie. Is it appropriate for a president of any party at any time to solicit assistance from a foreign country to influence our elections?
No, and that's why Hillary Clinton should be tried and put in jail for what she did with Christopher Steele and Fusion GPS. Presidential candidate, I should say. Presidential candidate. To the Ukrainian phone call, it's one of the most intentionally misrepresented phone calls that you could ever come across. He never asked a foreign president to try to intervene to investigate Joe Biden. Instead, the favor he asked for was to try to go after CrowdStrike. It was the president of Ukraine that first brought up Mayor Giuliani. It was the president of Ukraine that brought up the topic of corruption. This phone call is being intentionally misrepresented. And guess what? It was a setup from within our own government. Congressman Adam Schiff changed the whistleblower laws. He met with the whistleblower well before it became public, sat on it for over 2 months. And there's a lot around this. And so if we're talking about foreign collusion with adversaries, I think we should, we are looking into the origins of the Russia investigation and Fusion GPS, which is now a criminal investigation, and we'll see what happens.
All right, Kyle.
Okay, so you were almost there, Charlie. You were so close, but so far at the same time. So, okay, you're actually correct about one thing you said there. Hillary Clinton did indeed try to get foreign help in the election against Donald Trump with Ukraine. But I don't know why you have to be so hacky when you say Trump didn't try to do the exact same thing. That's exactly what he did.
So show me in the transcript, where did he do that?
Listen, there's a reason why Donald Trump's only response now is there was no quid pro quo, no quid pro quo at all. Because that's his only dodge, because he was obviously trying to get dirt as well on Joe Biden.
Show me when he did that. He was asking for the president to go after CrowdStrike, which was foreign meddling in our own election. He never, ever said, ever go after Joe Biden. The idea of corruption.
He was talking about Burisma, and he was talking about the money that Joe Biden was getting paid.
Burisma was never mentioned in the phone call. Now you're inferring, you're looking into it.
You don't have to infer it. He wants him to investigate Joe Biden. What do you think he's investigating him for? Puppies and rainbows?
He said,
it's for the money he was getting paid.
I want you to go after CrowdStrike. This is a very important thing, because if you look at the actual transcript of the phone call, and you look at who brought up the topics. Right, and by the way, there was no quid and no quo, because the Ukrainian president time and time again said the aid was not intentionally withheld. We didn't even know the aid was withheld. We never made calls about the aid that were withheld.
Doesn't matter. He was still trying to get dirt, and that's obvious. Listen,
but show me in the call where it says that. I mean,
hold on. please. You sound like Trump with the literal,
asking for
a direct
facts,
literal interpretation of this is exculpatory of me. Everybody knows what he was trying to do because he runs the government like a mafia boss. Now, you could like that or dislike that, but it is what he was trying to do. Now, here's the difference between me and you. The difference between me and you is I will admit that Hillary Clinton did indeed try to reach out to the Ukrainian government to get dirt on Trump. And in fact, that's how we learned about Paul Manafort and his corruption, is because Hillary did reach out to the Ukrainian government and did get dirt. Now, I'm willing to say in the case of Hillary Clinton, that's dead wrong. You all need to ask yourself, why is it he can't admit the obvious on the other side? Why is it Donald Trump did nothing wrong at all? It's ridiculous.
So Kyle, I'll ask a third time. I want you to cite the specific part of the transcript call.
Charlie, I don't have the fucking transcript in front of me.
Well, because
why are you being ridiculous?
Because if it existed, if this smoking gun existed, people would say, here's what he said wrong, and here's the specific U.S. criminal code that was violated. It simply does not exist. Instead, they're inferring,
okay,
and
Charlie,
they're saying,
yeah.
oh, this
Trump
reads like how a mob boss will talk.
You can say much this field, Trump did nothing wrong. Next question.
This all comes down to this. From spring of 2016, the media talking heads were floating out impeaching Donald Trump. Before he was even elected president of the United States, impeachment was ramped up. And Kyle, you totally and completely agree with this. I know this, that there was something so suspicious and so immoral and so wrong what our own FBI and our own internal government did to this president to plant information, to use the Democrat National Committee to collude with foreign adversaries, to lie to a FISA court judge, and spy on a political opponent that you might disagree with. And I hope justice will finally be held with that. However, Kyle, I understand that there's pent-up anxiety and dissatisfaction with this president because he won an election that he wasn't supposed to win. However, that does not give you the license to misrepresent what he has done. And time again, the Democrats swing and miss. For 2 years, I was promised some sort of big, huge bellwether revelation of the Mueller report. Oh, Mueller is coming, $30 million taxpayer-funded investigation, and they found absolutely nothing. And what did they do as soon as the Mueller investigation ended? As soon as the Mueller investigation ended, they went to the Ukrainian investigation. This goes down to two very simple things. Number one, they have not accepted the democratically elected president of the United States who won an election he was not supposed to win. Number two, they hate Donald Trump a lot more than they love America.
Just so you know.
And I'm not saying you, I'm saying the general they.
Listen, thank you for inviting me to the Charlie Kirk monologue night. I really appreciate it.
I'll let you finish on this one.
Right. Okay, so let me respond to that. I'll sum up what he just said in a really simpler way, and you won't have to sit through it all. Donald Trump, good. Democrat, bad. Very high-minded, Charlie. Thank you very much. So anyway, here's the difference. I'm willing to admit when Democrats do something wrong. What Charlie Kirk will not admit on this stage here tonight is that Donald Trump owns a hotel in Washington, D.C. And oh, would you look at that? The Saudi government just happened to funnel him $300,000 through that hotel. Oh, would you look at that? Donald Trump just approved a multi-billion-dollar weapons deal that goes to Saudi Arabia as they're committing a genocide in Yemen. Now, hold on. Now, I get the sense that if I gave you that exact set of facts and it was the fucking Clinton Foundation, you'd be pretty fucking pissed off. But with Donald Trump, it's nothing. It's nothing.
All right.
You mad, bro?
Oh, damn right I'm fucking mad because you're not willing to criticize him for fucking anything.
So, all right, Charlie, I'll let you respond, but hold on. Let me add another dimension to this because we
doth protest too much, I think, is how the old quote goes. But
so, this has been framed in the lens of corruption.
Yeah,
and so we've talked about what Biden's son did. So how do you weigh the corruption of what Biden's son did with what the Trump kids are doing internationally? Do you put them on the same level?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond. So,
and also importantly, how do we fix that in the future? How do we prevent future kids of politicians from profiting off of their offices?
Yeah, if you're looking for someone to defend Saudi Arabia, you know this, Kyle. I'm not going to do that. I think that our inside-out alliance to Saudi Arabia has been a mistake for the last 20 or 30 years, and they've misdirected us throughout the Middle East. And no, I don't support their proxy war of Yemen. So there I am, disagreeing with something.
What about the $300,000 that went to Trump?
Number two, I'm happy to respond to that. I think it's laughable, to be honest, when a guy has a net worth of $3.8 billion and has hundreds of millions of dollars going through his entire international organization, that somehow he's influenced by $300,000 at a D.C. asset hotel to approve a weapons deal. I mean, if that,
There you go.
you're the conspiracy theorist if you think that's actually what's happening. I'm going to approve a Saudi weapons deal because my companies do hundreds of millions of dollars, and I don't know, the Saudis bought did $300,000 in hotel nights. Let me go to Joe Biden. Kyle has similar distaste for the Biden family, so I'm not going to loop him into my critique here. However, conventional Democrats are protecting Joe Biden and yet trying to parallel it against Trump. Here's the big difference. As soon as Biden took office in 2008 as vice president, Hunter Biden went forth and sought international deals. He went on a board in Burisma that he was totally unqualified for, that he didn't speak the language, he had no familiarity with the territory or region, he had no understanding of natural gas or upstream development, earning $80,000+ a year, not to mention his deal with the Chinese where he went on Air Force Two halfway across the world with Chinese officials and 6 days later secured a $1.5 billion investment deal for his fund, of which he was uniquely unqualified to run for. What's the difference with the Trumps? The day that their father became the president of the United States, they stopped all international business deals.
Wrong.
They did not sign one new deal. The only international business that they did were deals that were on the books for 5+ years more. Kyle, you're entitled to an opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts.
I know,
my
Charlie.
friend.
Nice political talking point you got there. Who'd you get that from? John Kasich? Okay. So listen. Here's the bottom line, and I hope everybody looks this up. You know how much money Jared and Ivanka made since Donald Trump became president? $83 million in 1 year. If you think there's nothing wrong with that, I got a bridge to sell you.
So these were previously owned assets. They did not sign one new deal since they were in the administration. Point to me one new deal the Trump family signed since Donald Trump became president.
You don't make $83 million in 1 year
name another.
without being a grab bag of corruption.
Jared comes from a company called the Kushner Companies that own some of the most valuable assets in New York. So that income was deals that were already signed and revenue streams that were already established. The Bidens, the big difference, as soon as his dad became president, he said, it's money time. He went to Burisma. He went to Hungary and did some very questionable legal deals that are just coming out right now. And he got $1.5 billion from our greatest enemy, the Chinese, into his own fund because he took the Chinese on Air Force Two halfway across the world. That is morally objectionable. If the Trumps went to China and came back with $1.50, the media would publicly crucify them. They have done nothing of the sort.
So, and as you respond to that, let's get to the second part of the question, which is how do we actually fix this? How do we prevent kids of any president, regardless of their political party,
The way you fix this is you have intellectually honest people call out corruption where they see it, whether it's on the Democratic side or the Republican side. Somehow I could see it on both sides, whereas Charlie Kirk thinks Daddy Trump did nothing wrong.
Look, I'll ask you again, Kyle. Show me one deal that they signed since they became president.
My dude, I don't know if you're listening or not, but I said very clearly.
Can you name another deal?
Okay, are you going to let me talk?
Just name a deal.
Are you going to let me talk?
You
don't
routinely
make
interrupt me.
$83 million in 1 year when Daddy is president as an oopsie.
Right. So their income the year before that was $90 million and $95 million. They did business before they went into the White House, so they did not sign any new deals.
This is the cute little trick.
You do recognize that, right, Kyle?
Because as soon as I say, well, hold on now, it's proven that he took $300,000 from the Saudis while in office, he's like, oh, that doesn't count either.
Well,
so whether they're in office or they're out of office, it doesn't matter, and it's not corruption. Well, isn't that fucking convenient? That's super convenient, isn't it?
Here's the other thing that really fascinates me, and maybe you can explain it to me, Kyle, is that when you own international assets and you become president of the United States, are you just supposed to sell everything?
Yes!
Really? Wow. Wow. So let's build out this argument. So you spend.
You got it.
Hold on, Kyle. You spend 50 years building a business from nothing, fighting back bankruptcy,
with Daddy's
renegotiating
money,
creditors, employing hundreds of thousands of people over 50 years. And then you give that business to your kids. That's not good enough. You somehow have to sell everything in a fire sale to try to appease the media and the far left wing.
There was a president, excuse me.
You will not be perfectly happy until Donald Trump's net worth goes down significantly. Basically, what this is all about is in search of corruption that does not exist.
Oh, please.
The reason it does not exist is that Republicans and conservatives are held to such an unrealistically high standard. If President Trump's sons were going around to China right now, seeking out money, seeking out deals, it would be all over the news. Hunter Biden, you know this. Hunter Biden went to Ukraine for one reason.
You sure know how to talk a lot, don't you?
I'm sorry, what?
You sure know how to talk a lot.
But Kyle, you should start refuting what I'm saying, not swearing and walking around the
You're
stage.
just not listening.
All right. Kyle, I'll let you give the last word on this, and then we'll move on.
No, this will be very simple, and I'll go right to the point, unlike him. So there's a president by the name of Jimmy Carter. He had a fucking peanut farm, and he had to sell his peanut farm because the Supreme Court rightly said, you know what, man, that could be an issue because you could have foreign governments funneling you money through your peanut farm, and we can't have corruption. We're supposed to be a first world country. But somehow this fucking president gets to have hotels all over the world, a hotel in D.C., the Saudis funneling him money. Let me say this one more time, and this will be the final time. If this was the Clinton Foundation, I would be just as up in arms. But when it's the Trumps, I'm up in arms and you're not, and that says a lot.
All right, final question on the international stage. We talked at the beginning of this debate about the working class and the Rust Belt. Are we winning the trade war?
It depends. Look, I think one of the longest lasting and most important legacies of this president is reorienting our entire foreign policy towards our greatest enemy, which is the Chinese Communist Party. Both parties, Bush and Obama together, had a bipartisan agreement to try to continue to allow China to dump products into our country and hack our cyber grids and build Confucius Institutes on our college campuses while middle America was continually disenfranchised. And guess what? There's going to be I believe, a very good deal struck on trade with China very, very soon. And China has been screwing the world for so long. They have the world's second biggest economy, yet they're still classified as a developing nation. They're allowed to pollute unrestricted without any sort of oversight whatsoever. And this president, I think there's a lot of bipartisan agreement, I think you'll agree with this, Kyle, reorienting our entire foreign policy and our entire national conversation against the rise of China. And guess what? I totally stand with the people of Hong Kong, unlike the National Basketball Association that just wants to continue the money flow from China coming there. And so, look, I think absolutely, and we've already seen President Trump renegotiate NAFTA, yet Nancy Pelosi refuses to move the USMCA through Congress. We've seen President Donald Trump sign a historic trade deal with Vietnam, sign a historic trade deal with Japan. And guess what? I'm a big believer in bilateral trade deals. I think the Trans-Pacific Partnership, my goodness, NAFTA, TPP, all this stuff should be blown up and done bilateral trade deals one by one, and that's much more long-term sustainable than just having these globalist type, trade deals that benefit the rich, the few, and the well-connected.
All right, Kyle.
The question was about...
Are we winning the trade war?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. You have to look at the net job loss or job gain. And there are some specific industries that did well as a result of the tariffs that Trump put out there. I think the steel industry is doing better as a result of that. But then there is this other backlash effect where other industries are hurt by it. So if you look at the total job loss or job gain, I do believe we're a little bit in the negative. So I think there's a case to be made that we're not winning the trade war. However, I will say I actually don't disagree with the idea that you have to do something, because this country has absolutely been destroyed since our manufacturing base was just gutted, and that has to do with NAFTA, that has to do with permanent normal trade relations with China, that has to do with, all these trade deals. I mean, just point blank period, it was all for the rich and the corporations, and it screwed over workers, and we should have never done those deals in the first place. I think that's one of the main reasons why Donald Trump won, is because he went to the Rust Belt and he told those people, I'm going to bring your jobs back and all this stuff. So, it's a complicated question. I think we need to do something on trade. I don't think I trust Trump in the exact way that he's going about dealing with it.
All right, so final question here, and we talked about this a little bit backstage, and it's not really a point of debate, but something I think you've all heard through all of the answers is a libertarianism on both sides. You've talked about being kind of a libertarian left, and you have some libertarian tendencies. How do we, and that leads to some unexpected areas of common ground like we just saw on the trade issue. How do we create some space for that in our politics where the populist left and the populist right can unite on some of these issues?
Yeah, so I think we're actually already doing that, because you could see that, for example, Mike Lee, Republican Senator of Utah, and Bernie Sanders, they worked together to use the War Powers Act to basically try to stop us from arming Saudi Arabia and helping them facilitate a genocide in Yemen. So you do have, that's right, that's a really good thing. So, you do have points of agreement when it comes to war where we can work together, and you do have points of agreement when it comes to the drug war, for example. I want to free every single nonviolent drug offender in this country. I also want to legalize marijuana. I want to decriminalize all substances, because Listen, it really is it's a personal issue, and if anybody has problems with it, they should be getting treatment. They should be getting rehabilitation. They shouldn't be locked up. So, yeah, there are points of agreement. I think when it comes to social issues, Charlie and I will agree, insofar as you fully do agree with non-interventionism on foreign policy and basically a hands-off approach to, cultural issues and social issues.
Yeah, and look, so here's one thought exercise, and I do want Kyle to have, I know we're running out of time, but we'll agree, but I don't totally agree with everything on foreign policy, but we're more in agreement that we should have a more restrained foreign policy. Drugs, I wouldn't, boy, that's too far for me, but I do think decriminalization of certain substances is perfectly fine. But here's what always perplexes me, and Kyle, backstage you called yourself a libertarian leftist. Is that a correct way?
That's a fair categorization, or populist left, I call myself.
So here's something, and maybe you can explain it to me. I'm skeptical of government in all forms. So I'm skeptical of the government that locks up the people that are wrongly accused, skeptical of the government that declares war on the country that is incorrect and invades the sovereign country. That's also why I want to restrain federal bureaucracy and federal regulation. If you don't trust the government, Kyle, why do you want the government to run our health care and take all of our guns away?
That's a good question. That's actually a very good question, and I'm more than happy to answer it. So it's because I'm also an empiricist. And so I believe in what I can see, what is evidence-based. And when I look around the rest of the world, it's just a fact that the rest of the developed world, particularly in Scandinavia, they kick our butt when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education. So ultimately, listen, I do want to maximize freedom as much as possible, but I'm also pragmatic in the sense that I'm not going to stubbornly refuse to improve our healthcare system when I can see the studies. I see that we're ranked number 37. I see that the UK and France are routinely ranked in the top 5. The rest of the Scandinavian places are in the top 5. And so I don't have a fucking cinder block where my head is supposed to be. I know that there are some things where government works, and we should indeed have more government in those areas.
Do you want to get rid of the federal minimum wage?
No, I want to increase it.
Well, the Scandinavian countries, except Finland, have no federal minimum wage.
That's a good point, but
so we should get rid of the federal minimum wage.
Tell them why that is. That's because they have unionization for everybody. Exactly.
So they voluntarily collectively bargain.
Right.
Sweden has, so I want to close this point. Sweden has universal school choice. They have higher degrees of economic freedom in Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark than in America. They have, like I mentioned, they have no federal minimum wage. There's also some bad things in the Scandinavian countries, like a 200% tax on cars, like a 22% VAT tax and sales tax, like the average income tax, 48% for the middle class, not the rich. But by the way, the other thing that always perplexes me, and I know we're running low on time, is that Senator Sanders, your preferred candidate, wants to keep it in the ground and has a big war on fossil fuels. However, it's the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund that has been funded primarily through North Sea oil, natural gas, and fracking, the very same resource that the left likes to demonize. But the final thing I'll say is this, Kyle.
You want me to answer that or no?
Well, I think we're running, how much time do we have?
But we do got to wrap it up. Say your last thing, and then Kyle can respond.
Last thing I'll say is that I'm consistent with the use of government power. I don't think you can pick and choose where you want government big and government small. I am skeptical of government power when it comes to them confiscating our guns, running our healthcare, running our education system, and telling private businesses how to operate. I believe in the rights granted from a creator, not from God. And finally, I just find it interesting that people can say, I want government to be totally in control of things that matter to you most, but not in control of other things. I find that highly ironic. Either you are trustful of government or distrustful of government. I will always err on the side of freedom and liberty, not on bureaucratic, corrupt government.
Okay. All right, last word.
Listen, that's fine. Listen, you could categorize that however you want to categorize it. I'd call it nuance. I'd say, I can see places around the world where government works better in certain areas, and I can see places where I want less government. For example, another point of agreement we would have is on the NSA. I don't want the government spying on us every which way. So, but to answer your question, because you brought up the Sovereign Wealth Fund and how that's funded through fossil fuels, which is true, and that's a decent point. However, what I would say is, listen, man, we got to get serious. And the bottom line is, there are inevitable patents and an economic boom just waiting to happen when it comes to green and renewable technology. And I want a Green New Deal, emphasis on the New Deal part, to bring millions of jobs to this country, pay everybody a living wage, and make sure that we run the future, that we are the leading country moving forward. And I think that we could all win if we go down that path.
All right, guys, let's give a big round of applause for Kyle and Charlie. And give a round of applause for Politicon 2019. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.